True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition. Normally, this is our Missing Monday night where we really dive into some of the missing that we've been following. But tonight, obviously, is on the heels of something that most of us will only, if ever, never, hopefully, have it happen in their lifetime. And that was an attempted presidential assassination. We saw this for some of us that are old enough happen back with Ronald Reagan when that attempt occurred. But this is something so rare and so unique. And quite frankly, I've spent a lot of time obviously watching all the coverage, as probably most of you all have, tweeting about it extensively, because it's, to me, a bit jaw-dropping that the mistakes that were made in previous assassination attempts were made again in a lot of regards. So have a very special guest here. We're going to be joined by Darrell James. You'll hear me call him DJ. He was on the Dallas SWAT team for many years. He spent over 26 years as a special agent in the FBI. He was the assistant team leader of the Dallas SWAT team, and he served on multiple protection details. For those of you who don't know, I was the first female ever on the FBI director's detail. So I served under James Comey on that detail, and also served protecting many other FBI directors on details and attorney generals as well. But without further ado, I want to bring on Darrell because I really want to break down what we do behind the scenes, how this all works from a protection standpoint, from agents who have been on those back scenes preparing for just these types of protection details. We're going to bring in DJ. Hopefully we're going to bring in DJ. DJ.
Hello, Jennifer. How are
Hi,
you?
how are you? I can't see you up on the stage. There we go. My
Here I
mods
am.
all under control, I know, but I probably fiddle too much. Welcome. How's everything in Dallas?
Everything's going well in Dallas. Hot, of course, but everything's going well. How are you out there in Florida?
Oh, we're doing good. We're hot as well. But I'm so glad to have you here. I gave everybody kind of, I don't know if you could hear me, but just a little bit of intro about you and just how amazing of a person, of an agent, of a SWAT operator. I've always thought you were. I've known DJ for many, many years. We were actually at the training academy together. He was a class ahead of me. And he's still a class ahead of me, if you get it. Just a great guy and so good at what he did as an operator. DJ, without further ado, I want to ask about what were your initial reactions? Where were you? What did you see when you learned that President Trump, former President Trump, had been shot?
Well, I was shot at and shot in the ear.
And
Uh,
shot.
yeah, I was here at the house. I was watching probably some sporting event on TV, I guess, and of course, the news broke in that there had been shots fired at former President Trump's rally. That was the first news, right? And then, of course, after that, they broke actually to the rally, started reporting and saying that they were still getting the reporting in. They weren't saying shots yet, right? They were saying there were loud noises. They heard pops. They showed that obviously they had the live video of the rally, and they were showing that the Secret Service responding, getting former President Trump down behind the podium, and the tactical guys coming out in front. So at that point, like you just said, unfortunately, this has happened in our lifetimes, Jennifer. I don't want to give away your age. I give away my age, but obviously, like you talked about, former President Reagan, the attempted assassination back in the early 80s, Robert Kennedy, right? In the late 60s, we were only babies at that time. And even right before I was born, at least in 63, President Kennedy was killed. So, you know, of course, this is shocking to everyone. But then when you think about it, I mean, these type of things have happened, like you said, in just our lifetimes, which I don't consider either of us to be that old, right?
That's right, DJ. And I think I know when you and I were talking earlier today, it's just, you know, it's so unfortunate and, you know, that these types of attempts continue to occur. And I, for 1 minute, want to point out the victims in this situation. We have a lost firefighter, 50-year-old man, Corey, who threw his body on and tried to shield his family from getting shot and was shot. Full name, Corey Compatore. And he not only was a firefighter, which I just have so much respect for people who, you know, are on the front lines and first responders and saving people from fires and also going into medical events and saving people. It's no wonder that he also jumped on his family to save him. He took a bullet directly to the head and died instantaneously, according to a doctor that was on scene, that was right there, that actually helped get him off the stage. His recounting of exactly what happened there was really so tragic. And then we also have David Dutch, 57, who was shot. And we also have James Coffindaffer, 74, who was shot. They are in stable conditions, so they're still hospitalized, but their conditions are stable. But I just wanted to, for a moment, really reflect, if you will, or send our condolences to the families of these individuals, and also to former President Trump, because he was hit, as DJ again mentioned, in the ear, the tip of the ear. There's some amazing film footage of that bullet whizzing by and just clipping his ear. DJ, talk about the T-zone and talk about how close that was to taking out his life instantaneously.
Yeah, it was amazing that, as you know, right before, like you said, that picture of the bullet hitting his ear, he turns his head slightly to the right, and that probably saved his life, right? Because if it had been just a straight-on shot, you know, it probably would have killed him. But just turning his head slightly to the right at that moment when the shooter was firing that shot. And I think it's good that you did recognize the actual victims, people who were killed, and there were other people who were shot during this incident. Again, which I'm sure we'll talk about. You know, this has taken the whole country, the whole world by surprise, and everybody, you know, it's that something like this could happen. But again, like, we have shootings, mass shootings all the time where there are victims and people shot by somebody who just decides to go get a gun, and you know, they just want to go kill people and take people out. So yeah, I think we should never forget that, you know, there was someone killed in this incident and other victims of this shooting.
Right. So the politics, which I'm not ever getting into politics. I have sort of strong feelings personally about not getting into politics. And so for me, it didn't matter whether it was Biden, it didn't matter whether it was Trump, it didn't matter whether it was Robert Kennedy. To me, I was absolutely angered, appalled, surprised that this sort of assault could happen in our day and age, especially when we see where the shots were fired from, and for you and I knowing what it means to do in advance, what it means to understand the points that have to be secured before you can hold such a rally. And of course, that's why we have, DJ, people thinking this is some, you know, deep, you know, conspiracy within the government. Biden spoke some words about putting a target on Trump. I believe, the day of the shooting. And so, of course, everybody is taking that comment to be literal. But I think you and I understand that what happened in this situation was a breakdown, I believe, in terms of the security standards that were required to keep former President Trump and really everyone safe in that rally.
Right. Yeah. And so there's two things there, right? So I personally believe everybody's responsible for their own actions, no matter what President Biden says or former President Trump says, there's, like you said, there's a lot of stuff thrown out there by politicians and other people that's, wild or whatever. But in the end of the day, everybody's responsible for their own actions, right? That shooter was responsible for what he did, and he made the decision to go do that. And then the security breakdown is just something. That's what my mind. You asked, where I was and when I heard the news. Well, like you and I, right? We come from a tactical background, so the first thing I pay attention to is the tactical response, right? Okay, they got him down. What are they doing now, right? What is their response to this? As I'm watching this play out, like I said, in front of the cameras, right, live, and you see there were two tactical guys up in front of the podium. You had all the Secret Service agents on top of former President Trump behind the podium. And so I'm watching that, seeing, okay, what's their move? And like you said, I've been on protected details. You've been on protected details. And my first thought is, you got to get him out of there, right? You got to get him out of that area, especially at that point. At least the public didn't know. Like I said, they were still not sure whether shots fired, what happened. The other thing I was watching was the reaction of the crowd behind him, right? The people who were sitting in the bleachers, they didn't seem to be panicked or reacting as if shots had been fired, and which surprises me even now, because most of the time we've seen concerts where this has happened, or other large gatherings where shots were fired, and what happens? People scatter. I mean, everybody takes off, but those people were just kind of sitting there looking around like, what's going on? I mean, so that reaction kind of confused me for a minute. Like, were there shots? Because this is not what I would think of a typical reaction to when people hear shots fired, right? And you see somebody get hit. I mean, they were a lot closer, obviously, and they saw the former President Trump had been hit, or they saw what the Secret Service was doing. You would have thought that people would have tried to get out of there and get out of the possible line of fire.
I thought that was interesting too. And when I saw, of course, we've all seen replay after replay. And I think because he was an estimated 164 yards away and the pop was more muffled, I think that might have been the reason. Also, a lot of people thought they could have been fireworks they were hearing, right? Because this is the type of activity that was going on, a rally, a Go Trump rally. And so it would make sense that people could be, igniting fireworks and whatnot. Yeah. And I think there was real confusion, because I think if they would have thought, oh my gosh, this is somebody shooting, we would have seen pandemonium like we've seen before. But wasn't it interesting, though, that the firefighter, Corey, that was shot, you could see all the blood in the stands. You can see everything happening, but I can't quite figure out exactly where the bleachers were. Obviously, it was a shot that was meant for Trump that, of course, hit Corey and killed him.
Yeah, and the same with me when you're first looking at it. And the shots that I had seen on TV show, you get where former President Trump is standing behind the podium, and then there are like two sets of bleachers behind him, one kind of on his right side, but there's a viewer to the left side, and then one on the right side. But when I saw another overhead shot of it, there's actually, I believe, another set of bleachers further to the left, or to former President Trump's right. And I believe that's where the former firefighter was actually sitting, in those bleachers. And that's why you don't see the reaction in the bleachers that are immediately behind the former President Trump, but it was in those other bleachers, I believe. I'm not positive, that's where he was sitting, and that's where the other victims that were struck. And I think this is all the information is coming out, right? We're trying to piece this together as the news is reporting it, and you're hearing the press conferences and things. It sounds like what happened is when and I'm sure, again, you'll get into this, how the shooter ends up on top of the building, right? The police confront him, and at that point, he starts firing out of panic, and he's kind of sighting in, right? He didn't have time. Again, just from reading reports, it doesn't appear he was up there, had sighted in and everything. He was just getting into position when he's confronted by the local police, and then he just starts shooting, and that's why he hits people in the stands first, and then he starts to try to sight in on former President Trump.
Right, I agree with that. And I said from the beginning, whoever is shooting that rifle was capable. Not a professional necessarily, but definitely capable of sighting in a rifle. And as you and I know, you can shoot a rifle so much more accurately than you can shoot a handgun, certainly, that you can shoot a shotgun. I mean, it is the most accurate gun you can shoot. And that's why a layman, if you will, somebody who hasn't been in the military or somebody who hasn't been in the police and practice, you can shoot it very accurately. I mean, typically you're going to have a scope type mechanism where you just have to literally put the crosshairs on where you intend to shoot and have a somewhat steady trigger pull. And that's why I would not be surprised at all if he had practiced before, but he was certainly capable of shooting. And as you know, from firearms instruction, sometimes the best shooters are the shooters that have never shot even in their life, but they're steady and they understand how to pull that trigger slowly and accurately.
Right, and you know this. You were a firearms instructor, and we spent a lot of time on the range. That type of weapon, AR-15, similar to the M4s that we had, M16 that I carried in the military, very accurate weapon, right? And then, like you just stated, when you add in the electronic sight things that are available now on the market, I mean, you could become a very good shooter, right? Without a lot of practice. I mean, if you've got a minimal amount of practice, you know how to operate the weapon, and then you put those sighting systems on the weapon and sight them in, it makes you automatically a very good shooter, especially from that distance. I mean, that weapon is made to shoot from 500 yards and be, an accurate weapon because it's a military style weapon. And so from 150 yards, it's not a very far distance for that type of weapon. And so, like you said, when you add in all those other components, and again, that's what gives me the thought, because the first thought is, if he had time, right, it would have been far worse. But the fact, when I started reading today, more things are coming out, and how he was confronted at some point by a police officer trying to climb onto the roof. It makes sense that he was just trying to get rounds off at that point, right? And they weren't well-aimed rounds, especially at the beginning.
Right. His plan got a little bit altered because
Right.
he had a little bit of pressure. And
Right.
but one thing I really want to just jump right into, because this is a point I brought up from the beginning, is, to me, the fallacy wasn't how Secret Service acted after the shots. The fallacy was in what was done in terms of the preparation before this event. DJ and I are going to talk about this and get into this, but you have what we call an advance team that goes. So when I was protecting or on the protection detail for Director Comey, we would go, a group of us, if I were on the advance, and you scope everything out in terms of a full on-site survey of the area he is planning to go to, no matter what it is. If he's going to speak, if he's going to meet with somebody, if he's just going to a hotel room overnight, you advance everything, egress, ingress, all the points around where somebody could possibly take a sight or a shot, so line of sight. And in your opinion, DJ, what did you see in terms of now doing kind of a after action review from what we know? What are you seeing in that realm?
Well, and it's like you said, and even taking a step further, like you said, you were on the detail. So I worked details as a SWAT agent here in Dallas when the director would come or the attorney general would come. So we would do an advance before the advance, right? Before somebody like you who's on the detail showed up, we had already gone to all the sites, taken a look, and then we would tell you, here's what we think is the best way down all that. And then you would look at it and say, well, we want to do it this way, or we want to do it that way. Oh yeah, that's good. So like you said, there's a lot of advanced planning, right? And obviously, even for presidential candidates or president, it's going to even be more from the time that the advanced team gets there. The local Secret Service guys would have already gone out, and he's going to have somebody walking him through that whole area, because he's not going to be, you're coming from DC, you're not necessarily familiar with that area, but you're going to have somebody there who works for Secret Service who's going to walk you through and say, hey, here's what we see, and they're professionals and they've done it, before also. So when I looked at that open air arena, right? So obviously you're worried about getting people in, getting people out. You got to go through all that magnetometers and all that kind of stuff. And how do you secure that? That's, it makes it a little more challenging. But then my next thought is, how does a person get basically the high ground, right? Get on a roof or something like that, that area would have been or should have been locked down. That was my initial thought, because of the location. It's just so 150 yards away, as it's been reported. It's just like we said, there are weapons that can easily fire from that distance, and you can look from that position directly into the open air area where he was speaking. You had a direct line of sight, so you've got to make sure. In my mind, I want to make sure that area is locked down, and we're not going to let anybody in or out or up there. That was my first thought of that.
Yeah, and when we talk about that, a lot of people are asking, well, listen, what role does local law enforcement play in this whole scene? And they play a very important role. In fact, as FBI agents, we even behind the scenes are looking for any sort of chatter, any sort of informant information before a high-profile person would arrive in our territory, to make sure there were no threats or anyone coming forward and saying anything about anything that could possibly be happening that would be negative toward the security of an individual coming into our territory. And so behind the scenes, a lot of that is going on. And we also always touch base with the local authorities. So that means the sheriff's office, that means the city police, that means really all the other law enforcement agencies who could have jurisdiction or know of something going on in that area in advance of a person arriving. So when you consider that, the question I have is, how far out was the perimeter of the Secret Service? In my opinion, it should have been out as far away. I would probably say 200 yards if I were in charge of that particular advance. And then I would make sure that each of those buildings were not only cleared, but that a local officer was either on the roof, because then they have a good line of sight, or definitely securing that premises during the speech. What are your thoughts on that, DJ? What's been your experience?
Yeah, exactly the same. And I'm not positive on how far, Secret Service sets their perimeter. And I'm sure that information is probably not public information anyway. But, in a situation like this, you got to be flexible, right? When you see, okay, because when you look at the overhead view of that area, it's a pretty flat area. They call it a showground or whatever. It's just kind of an open area. But there's a building that at this point may have been, or at least it's been reported, outside of their normal perimeter, right? But when you see that, and again, the line of sight from that building into where how you're going to do the setup, right? Where the podium is going to be, where the stage is going to be, where all those things is going to be. When I say that, Secret Service knew that. So as they're looking at that, and they're, like you said, talking to the local law enforcement, they've got to look at that and say, wait a minute, this building may be an issue. How do we secure this? How do we lock it down? Even if our perimeter doesn't normally go out this far, we need to make sure that we've got a way to lock that down so that nobody can gain access to that or get up there, or we have our people, there securing it. Because again, as I look at the overhead view, that was like the biggest threat, besides somebody being, again, in the audience, which you have your metal detectors and all your entry point things to try to secure that. And that was the biggest threat as you look around from the overhead view, because of just the proximity to where he was speaking and the stage and everything else. So and like you said, the meetings, right? There are all type of meetings beforehand with the local law enforcement and everything, because intelligence, right, is key. Like, are there any credible threats? We're looking at this, we're looking at that. They want to get everybody there to see if there's any information, but then also to assign, who's responsible for certain areas. And that's what's going to be examined here in the next couple of weeks, right? With Secret Services, how did you do it? Why did you do it this way? And why was that area not locked down? I mean, that's going to be the question that everybody asks over and over and over again in the next coming weeks.
And over again, because President Kennedy was shot and killed in a similar type situation up in
exactly
in Dallas, Daley Plaza. I mean, a perfect example of you have to lock down a parade route, all the lines of sight and the points where an individual could shoot from. So for me, it is very much of a head scratcher. I'm just going to say it. I don't like to Monday morning quarterback. We've all been there, DJ. You don't want to Monday morning quarterback, but we have a death. We have 2 other injuries, and we don't know the extent to which those injuries will hurt them for the rest of their lives. Obviously, mentally, it's going to be emotionally, but we don't know. I heard one person, according to that doctor, there was an arm injury. Is he going to have full use of his arm? Another was a chest injury. Is there going to be anything internally? Did he lose a lung? Is he just fine? And what really happened with those injuries? And then of course the death of the firefighter. And I guarantee you, DJ, if President Trump's head would have been blown off, but for about 1/8 of an inch or a quick turn, which happened in a millisecond, that's probably what we would be discussing today. This to me was just pretty big drop of the ball.
Yeah, like you said, you hate the second guess. And we were talking earlier, and like I said, anytime Secret Service has a failure, right, it becomes, everybody knows about it, and it's going to get repeated over and over again. Right, we're still talking about the attempted assassination on Reagan. We're still talking about, right, there are movies being made about the JFK assassination and theories out there, and that happened before I was born. So that's a long time ago. So yeah, these things are going to be discussed and replayed over and over, and it's hard for them to escape this because it's so much in the public eye. But you look at that, and I just, in my mind, I don't have a good reason. Now, I've heard the explanation that I've heard, at least, and I don't know if you've heard anything differently, is that they said, hey, we had our perimeter, the inner perimeter, right? And the local law enforcement was assigned the outer perimeter, and that building was part of their assignment. And like you said, I don't hope it's not Monday morning quarterbacking, because I don't want to do that, but I would still say, hey, when I look at that, the overall, that building to me was, again, next to the people who are actually right up there inside the venue, is the biggest threat, right? That's the next biggest threat besides the people that are in the venue. And if I'm there and if I'm in charge of that, I want to make sure that we've got that secured, so we don't have to worry about that. Because even if people inside the venue, you've got so many people in there, and you can see them, and they got metal detectors and all that kind of stuff that they had to go through to get there. But you don't have, if you got somewhere outside of it, you just got to make sure you don't allow anyone to have access. And that's what happened. Somebody got access to it, and so there was a failure somewhere. So it's a matter of, Secret Service, like I said, they seem to be saying it was the local law enforcement. Again, I don't know if you've heard anything differently, but that's what I read into everything I've seen in the media.
Yeah, but you know what? We can't have this, because at the end of the day, as you know, if it's our director's detail or the attorney,
you're responsible, right?
Yeah. We're responsible. So in other words, the Secret Service, for those who don't know, they don't protect FBI directors. They don't protect attorney generals. FBI agents do that. And so, but it's the same premise, and we all work together. As an example, when I was on Comey's detail, he was always at the White House. So when I would go over to the White House with Director Comey, we definitely interfaced, obviously, and intersected with the social or with the Secret Service agents that were covering the White House. So we all intersect, we all talk, we all work through our plans to keep our protectee protected. And so when you're talking about the buck stops here, it's going to stop with the Secret Service, and they should have worked with the local law enforcement if that was the directive for, listen, starting at 140 yards, everything beyond that is the local police. The local police better have it written up in an operations plan and have discussed that so everyone knew where everyone was. And I'm just not sure that that happened, DJ. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure that happened. And then, the other part of this, and in any large operation, as you know, I've done Super Bowls, right? NBA All-Star games, big events where you're securing those areas. Communication, right? You have to communicate. Like you said, there's a schedule, right? The Secret Service has. Hey, at this point, we're locking down this area. Nobody comes in or comes out. And we do the same thing for large sporting events, whether it's Super Bowl, college football championship, right? There's a certain time that those venues, those places are just locked down. And unless you have a certain type of pass permit, you don't get in there. And then as the responsible parties are the ones that have to go back and check that, hey, we still got this area covered. Nobody's been let in there. The event's going to start in, X amount of hours or minutes. And they're going to do their last checks to make sure that those areas are secure. So what I'm reading into a lot of this press coverage is that there were some lapses in communication as to, hey, let's do our final checks to make sure everything is secure in these areas. And then when somebody did report that, it should have been immediately reported to the Secret Service. They have a command post going, right? They would have had a command post. It should have been reported to the command post. Now, again, it becomes tricky for them. You've got, former President Trump, he's doing a big rally. If there is something, is the threat viable enough to get him off that stage, right? We need to get him off that stage. But in my mind, and you did this, like you said, a lot more than I did it, but if you got something and you don't know what's going on, if I'm in charge, I'm saying, okay, let's get him off the stage, even if it's temporary, right? Let's just have moving back for a little while. We'll interrupt it. Yeah, he's probably going to be upset about it, but better safe than sorry is once you got somebody reporting that, hey, we may have somebody in the area we can't identify, and we're having some issues. But again, I think it happened so fast that once the police got a report, they tried to see what was going on. I think at that point it all just went, and obviously the communication wasn't fast enough to get him out of it.
Well, I think communication, and I don't know about you, but when I understood, and I've seen now all the footage of the gunshots of the police snipers that were in position, the two snipers that were in position that actually ended up taking the shot, and the information that there was, 3-minute lapse between when they were seen by these snipers and when they actually took a shot. In other words, they didn't take shot until shots began. We both know that engagement, the order of engagement, is written on the operations plan before the operation even begins. So when you're allowed to shoot. And you also know, as we saw in Ruby Ridge and Waco and all the other instances, that is not something that lone sniper is going to decide on his own, unless obviously there's an engagement of some sort. Because for people who don't know, I think what happened was, perhaps because, again, that was seen as the local law enforcement responsibility, total breakdown in communication, and they were concerned that, is that a local law enforcement officer? He had kind of these tan pants, right? 911s, like we used to wear. Yeah, he had the shirt with the flag on it. And when the officer went up the stairs and looked, did he think the same thing? Could this be a friendly, in other words? And my belief is that they might have been trying to sort that out. Did that cross your mind as well, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and again, the accounts that I've read, the two officers on the ground that responded, right? They tried to go up and look, and from what I read, the guy pointed a gun at one of the officers. So he immediately ducks for cover. At that point, again, is, and I don't know this, but it's when probably the shooting started. Now, before all this is happening, obviously he's up on the roof, and like you said, one of the Secret Service snipers sees him, and that's where the delay is. He's trying to figure out, like you said, is that a friendly, right? Because we don't have responsibility for that building. Local law enforcement does. Are they moving somebody into place to cover something that's going on over there before he takes that shot? Because like you said, once you take that shot, you can't take it back. And so he's trying to make sure, what am I, he's relying on communication and intelligence coming from somewhere else to say, hey, what's going on over there? Is there somebody up there? And they're trying to figure that out. Whoever's in the command post on the ground, hey, what kind of activity, if they know police are responding, they may think, well, maybe one of the officers is gotten up on the roof, right? So they've got to, there's a little bit of a lag time because it's going through a command post. Now, there should be Secret Service and police sitting right next to that command post, but still, right? Radio traffic to the police, police officers on the ground. What's going on? They got to report back to the command post. He's got to tell the Secret Service guy next to him. Secret Service guy has to tell the snipers and the observers on, at their post. So there's just that little few seconds of lag time again, and that's why I went back earlier to saying that's probably when the shooter starts to shoot once those police officers see him and he knows the gig is up, right? And if I'm going to get off shots, I got to get them off now. And that's why they weren't well aimed and they're going into the crowd. And then that's the pop. And then by this point, the Secret Service sniper is seeing that, hey, this is not a friendly, and we're getting reports from the ground, and he gets authorization to take that shot. But the conspiracy, it all happens there, but still, there's just that natural lag of saying when you're dealing with different agencies and different communication, what's going on, and I want to make sure before I take this shot because, again, like you said, you probably knew the guy who was at Ruby Ridge. I think a lot of guys in your class. So the agent that took that shot. I mean, it's when once you take it, you can't take it back, and so you want to be sure.
What he's referring to is Lon Haruchi, who took a shot, and the order of engagement there was if they came out with guns, that you were allowed to shoot. And what happened was a shot was taken at the target Weaver, but it went through the door and it hit and killed his wife. So the sniper couldn't even see behind the door, and Lon hit, I believe, right in this area. And then it went through him and went through the door and killed Linda Weaver. And so, but the point DJ is making, in that case, Lon was a little off. Again, it's usually because of movement. For those of you in the audience who are shooters or who handle guns, there's nothing more difficult than shooting a moving target, especially if you're moving. In this situation, he was likely steadied, but the president, former president, was moving. And I'm in total agreement with you, DJ. That's why we're talking about a president that was hit in the ear rather than is dead right now.
It's just that slight turn and the rush. So even there's going to be a lot of blame to go around, and there's going to be some that comes to these local law enforcement guys, but they probably did save his life by making him rush those shots. They probably did save his life, because if that guy had a chance to steady himself, again, like we talked about earlier, that 150-yard shot with that type of weapon is just not a very difficult shot. And he's got all time in the world to make it, right? But him being rushed, I think, explains why there were rounds kind of sprayed everywhere.
And when a lot of people are wondering, well, why didn't the local officer that climbed the ladder with, all the people down below saying, oh my God, there's a guy low crawling on the roof and calling attention to these locals. And then they go up there and they don't take the shot, yet he pointed the gun at them. I have no explanation for that other than, were they concerned that it was a friendly, but a friendly would never point a gun at you. So I have no explanation for why these local officers didn't shoot. But as you know, DJ, they unfortunately don't get the training that we get. And that's why we have actually in the Bureau, law enforcement training for street survival, special training to go out into the local departments and help them with training, because it's so rare that they have situations like this, and sometimes they don't know how to react. And he reacted instinctively, I believe, by ducking. And then it was just now 8 bullets that they're saying, I think. And then, the Secret Service sniper, believe me, it's just like that. And he was dead on and right in the T zone. And that shooter was dead.
Yeah. And, again, I'm just going on the reports that I've read. The reports that I've read, the local law enforcement guys, when he comes on the roof, basically he has to be lifted up to get to the area on the roof. He looks over, and at that point is when the guy points the gun at him, and he actually ducks, right, to get out of the line of fire, because he thinks, like you said, somebody's pointing a gun at me, and he realizes it's not another officer gun at him. And at that point, again, and I'm assuming this because I don't know, I'm thinking that's when the guy started to fire. So it wasn't that he didn't have a chance, the local guy, to even address. Kind of, once he ducks, of course, they're on an unstable platform. One officer is holding another officer up, that they fall, so they don't have a chance to get off a shot, and they're just not in a position because they're coming from down. They're below him, and that's when the snipers had to intervene, and they were the only ones in a position to take that shot, and that's why he was able to get those shots off. So I don't know that it was just not that opportunity to get it off. I mean, as we know, things happen fast. And when somebody sees a gun pointed at them, they're going to duck, right? We'll have a lot of people say, why did he duck? Why he was a hero? We've both been in those situations. I was in the military, the first thing in the Marine Corps, right? Get down, take cover, return fire, right? That's what you learn. Get down, take cover, return fire. And that's just how it works. And you see a gun pointed at you, if you have any intelligence at all, you're gonna duck, because especially if you think it's not a friendly, because you know what's coming out of the other end of that barrel.
Right. And that's the best explanation. I don't think I stated that position very well at all, but that's exactly what I think too. And for people who have never taken any sort of tactical classes, shoot, don't shoot, I offer them for civilians. And it's amazing. For the first time, they understand what it means to make a decision in a half a second. When you got a paintball coming at you and it hurts when you get hit, they understand how quick everything goes. And that's what these law enforcement officers are dealing with. It's quick. They're making a decision. And like you said, it's kind of like when the mask drops in the airplane and they said, don't worry about the baby, make sure you're okay, and then go to the baby. Because in other words,
right,
if you're dead, fall into the ground, how are you ever going to react to get the threat? And it just happened in probably a second or two, DJ. I think you'll agree.
Yeah. I mean, it happened, like you said, that amount of time, you see that barrel coming towards you. He tries to duck. Again, they're on an unstable platform. One officer holding the other. They go down. They can't talk on the radio. Obviously, one guy's holding the other guy. I'm sure he's using 2 hands. One guy's trying to keep himself from falling, right? So that's where the information had to come from, right? They were the ones that were the closest to that shooter. But how are they going to report that to the command post to let them know what's going on? Because, right, they're not in a position to radio. Now that the sniper has to wait to get that information until he can engage. Again, that explains probably why you had some of that lag time that people are talking about between the time that the shooter started shooting and the sniper actually engaged him.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is, though, poor planning was the biggest problem here. And
it always goes back to that planning and communication.
Yeah. And that led to this. I want to touch base on something that's really been in the news. I was just on News Nation last night, and they asked me this question, and I was really actually a little shocked. But the question was about all of the women that you can see in this Secret Service detail. So there's one up on the podium. She's kind of blonde. And then there's at least, I think it's possibly 3 others, for a total of 4 that are in and around the armored car, limousine type Suburban that they put former President Trump in. And there's been a lot made of. In fact, I read right before we got on here that Elon Musk said something like having a short Secret Service agent is, I don't know, like, it was really kind of crude, wearing a string bikini in a boxing match or something like that for a man. So the point was, though, that it just can't cover. But I want to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, I'm a woman. I'm a short woman. And there are very specific requirements for SWAT operators and for, I believe, Secret Service agents, certainly those serving on the detail. I went to FLETC before I went to the FBI Academy. That's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. And my class was full of Secret Service, was full of U.S. Marshals. That's where everybody else trains besides the FBI and the DEA. And so my point is that women don't not get to pass because they're women. They still have to do as many pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, run as fast, jump as high. You have to do everything. And because your stature isn't there, but do you know what you're doing? Are you going to be in the position you're supposed to be? Really, quite frankly, you're doing everything you can to get this protectee to follow your directions. I mean, Trump was worried about his shoes, right? Because they grabbed him so quick, his shoes flew off. So he's like, man, I want my shoes. And so he, quite frankly, I was astonished. What about you, DJ, about how well he reacted to being shot in the ear?
Yeah, well, the two things, right? First, like you said, addressing the deal with having women Secret Service agents. I mean, that's right. They're women Secret Service agents. That's just the way it is. They're women FBI agents. You were one. You were a female SWAT operator, which I don't know. You may know the number, but there aren't very few. I was like one. You were the only one on our team, and I was on the team for 16 years, and probably still to this day, I don't think there are any women on the team. And so, like you said, you got to meet the qualifications, right? You had to do the pull-ups, the run, the shooting, all the same things that I had to do or any other or operator had to do. That's part of it. And if you can meet those qualifications, then you're qualified to be on that team. I mean, stature. I mean, you as a protecting the director of the FBI. Well, James Comey's a very tall man, right? He's probably 6'4", right? He's taller than I am, and I'm 6'2". So he's a tall guy. And so again, the same type of deal. I mean, it's a matter of being qualified and being able. You got to take the same physical test and shooting test that everybody else when we go out there for that tryout and try to make those teams. And then the reaction. My surprise was they didn't get him off that podium faster. And then, like you said, he had the fist pump where he's going down. My thought, if I'm on that stage, I would have shoved his butt down them stairs and into that car as quickly as possible to save his life and to save my life, because those agents weren't protected either, right? They didn't have any protection behind them. So you're trying to get him into a safe area. As you know, when we have a protectee in a hardened facility, you have a location or a room. You say, something goes bad, we're going to get him to this hardened area, and we're going to. But in an open area like that, those cars are your best protection. They're armored limos, especially built for his protection. So my deal is, we're going to get him there. If we got to drag him off the stage, and he's a big guy, we got to drag him. We're going to drag him to that car and get him in there as quickly as possible. Again, because you're there to keep him alive, and I want to protect the rest of those agents that get them out of the line of fire. So that was my thought.
You made a couple of just great points. I want to touch base and just reiterate. The one thing that they should have done, I believe, and you're the one that brought this up, and you're so right, is the minute those snipers saw that person on the roof, whether they knew he was a friendly or not a friendly, that is an immediate, listen, let's get Trump down, let's get him off the stage, and let's reevaluate what is happening over here. So you didn't necessarily have to take a shot to kill the person, but you should have. And again, we're a little bit Monday morning quarterbacking, but we're doing it from experience, because DJ, if you would have gotten that call as a team leader, which you were the ATL of the Dallas team, you would have said, and the gold team leader, you would have said, listen, let's get him down. I mean, I think I would
Yeah,
have.
and you know, be honest, to be fair to them, you never know because you're not in that position. But yeah, like you said, in my mind, you rely on the information. Hey, we've got an unknown possible threat, and he's going to the top of a building. And like I said, a building that has line of sight. You know, I keep going back to that line of sight to that platform, that podium where former president is standing. My deal is, if we don't have control of it, right? Nobody's telling me, okay, we've identified him, we've got him in custody, we're talking something, we're talking to him, whatever. If I'm not hearing that, and I'm sitting in that command post in charge, I'm saying, hey, we got to get him off the stage, right? We've got to get him there because we don't have control of the situation. And I'm just going to have to explain this later, right? He's going to be upset. His campaign's going to be upset. So be it. But we're going to get him off that stage, and we'll worry about that tonight, right? Later on, after this deal is over, because we don't have, obviously, like I said, we don't have control of the situation. Again, happens quickly. I don't know the timeline between when police were first alerted to that person and when those officers encountered him. That could have been within a minute or two, right? But you know, at that point, yeah, you're starting. I put myself, like you said, being a team leader, having to make those type of calls. You know, your stomach is getting a little nervous, like, okay, what's going on out there, guys? What's happening? You know, and you know, you don't know. Again, I hate to second guess what was going through that the agent in charge, you know, whoever that was, their mind at that particular minute. Do you make that call? Don't you make that call? Like I said, I know there's a lot of ramifications to that, right? You know, we all know when you're dealing with politicians and campaigns, you know, security to them is something you guys do. But we're here to do, for our purpose, having a rally, getting people fired up, getting all this stuff going. They don't want to hear about all that other stuff. But to me, you're in charge. You know, you're in charge. You're running the security, and if you got to make the call, you know, that's what you get paid to do, make those difficult calls.
Yeah. And then back a little bit on the woman, because that's so big in the news right now about these women that weren't acting appropriately. They seemed panicked. I've seen people say that. I still haven't seen where they were panicked. I did see something that did really bother me. I don't know if you saw the woman who was in the at the back part of the vehicle, and she actually had her gun drawn and was kind of covering everyone. I was shocked at that personally, because, you know, either muzzle depressed, keep it in your holster. You know, we all know you can draw in like a second. At that point, they're supposed to be, Trump is getting pushed in the car. They're certainly supposed to be protecting against threats, but it was covered down on a lot of innocent people. And as you and I know, we've all seen a lot of ADs, the sympathetic response of the left hand grabs at something, the right hand can grab. And if that finger's on the trigger, God forbid, or something, bad things can happen. Right. So, but they sure are blowing that up, I thought, in terms of, well, listen, why were there 4 women on this detail? You know, sort of making a big deal. In other words, was this part of the deep state conspiracy to put women who aren't qualified on such a detail to make sure that, you know, Trump wasn't protected? What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I don't buy into conspiracy theories. Having worked cases, you know, besides being a SWAT officer, right? I've worked corruption cases for 25 years. So I've been called one of those conspirators probably by a few politicians that I put in jail. So I don't buy into that kind of stuff because I know I'm not, and I know I was doing my job. So, but yeah, I mean, the fact that you ended up those many female agents, that's, you know, that's a Secret Service. I mean, it's just like I said, they're female agents in the Secret Service. They happen to be either assigned specifically to the detail, and you would think the ones that were standing around his car, you know, his limo or whatever you want to call it, were probably, you know, assigned to him permanently, right? They weren't just the local Secret Service agents that were augmenting the detail, because they would probably not have been that close into the perimeter. But that's just the way Secret Service staffs, and that's the way it is. Again, they're there to do a job. Now we can debate whether or not they were doing it appropriately, like you said, waving the pistols around. You're going to have your gun drawn, like you said. you may want to be a little further out because, like you said, that sympathetic reaction, you as a firearms instructor, obviously you think about that and go to that. But yeah, not even you grab something, somebody stumbles into you or you get pushed, right? It's a chaotic situation. Like they're trying to push him into the car. One of the other agents stumbles and hits you and you got your finger, close to or on the trigger, right? You don't want to have an accidental discharge or anything like that. So you got a lot of things that could go wrong. I saw one of the agents, one of the females, like you said, standing at the door. She's trying to put a gun. She was left-handed because you see she's trying to put a gun back into her holster, but she couldn't seem to. But again, they're nervous, right? Everybody's young to us, Jennifer, but young, right? I'm sure they've never been in a live situation right now. So they trained, they've done it all in training and doing all that stuff. But when it's for real and this is going down, right, it takes on a little more adrenaline is pumping and flowing. And that's when your training has to come through and you got to just be ready to react. So, yeah, so there's going to be a lot of things taken out of this by Secret Service. I mean, unfortunately, like you said, and you brought up the Kennedy assassination, school book depository, right? Nobody secured that building, and you're going to have an open air limo driving by it. You would have thought, hopefully, that the Secret Service would have learned for that. Like the high ground, right? You want to secure that high ground and make sure nobody can get up there while the protectee is in that area. So I don't understand that. Hopefully we'll get an explanation here fairly soon. I just don't know if it'll be a good one. I'm sure it won't satisfy people, but yeah, there's a lot to learn, a lot to take away from this whole deal.
DJ, I want to touch next on the actual shooter himself, Thomas Crooks. So there obviously the Bureau's pouring over everything, and I know many people are upset that the Bureau has already came out with a statement. They came out with a statement very early on saying that this was a lone actor. He was not, this isn't a part of a big conspiracy. And people are saying, how in the world could the FBI know this so quickly? But as you and I know, this was one of my supervisors used to say, we're ringing the bell. In other words, this is all hands on deck. Everyone is going to be running leads. Everybody's going to be out there interviewing. That whole Pittsburgh office and all the offices in and around Pittsburgh, all hands on deck to get all these questions answered. And that's why it's a total force multiplier. It's not one agent or two agents that are handling this case. It's literally probably hundreds of agents and analysts that have had their fingers on this, being told, run down this lead, run down that. And that's why they know already. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. And just like I know, right? Saturday, sitting at home, and that cell phone would have gone off, right? If you were in that Pittsburgh office, you were assigned to the Pittsburgh office, and every agent would have been called in, right? And support person, intel analyst, you're getting everybody in there, and the FBI would have fired up their command posts, right? Because now they're going to be assigned an attempted assassination case because it's FBI jurisdiction. And so in my opinion, that's when the FBI is at its best. In those type of crisis situations, right, when you got to get resources, boots on the ground, information moving, that's what the FBI does so well, right? That's just, and I can say that I was a 26-year agent, but I've seen a lot of other law enforcement agencies, and I know that when we're in that kind of mode, right, there's some things we don't do very well, but we do that very well, getting information, getting it dispersed quickly, like you said, getting people out, doing interviews, knocking on doors, running down leads, all the electronic stuff, going through social media, doing all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they would have thrown all the resources at it, and to try to figure out who is this guy. And they've talked to, I'm reading in the paper already, but they've talked to classmates, and they've talked to the parents, and they've talked to all of these people. They're going to figure out who he is really quickly and see what he was espousing. And this deal with how can they say this? Director Wray has been saying this for years about domestic terrorism, the lone wolf, the biggest threat, right? But nobody wants to hear it, right? Everybody wants to point to something else. Oh no, it's the terrorism, it's foreign terrorists, all this, because Congress, it doesn't play well. But he's been telling us this for years. Every time he goes up and reports to Congress, he says domestic terrorism is the biggest threat that we're facing. But nobody wants to hear that, right? And they're working this case as a domestic terrorist case. So, I mean, the guy, he's obviously hearing, it's not him making it up. He's hearing it from the working agents and analysts inside the Bureau that are reporting to him saying, here's what we're seeing out here all the time, and this is our biggest threat. And that, and this is just an example of that, right? And the most difficult domestic terrorism cases are the lone wolf cases because of the lack of information about these people, and there's nobody, for lack of a better word, to control them, right? Even, in groups, you have somebody who may say, yeah, let's calm it down, with it, not do that. But when you have a single actor who just decides, I want to do this, there's nobody there to stop, right? They decide to do it. And again, I don't know. I'm not conducting the investigation. All I know is what I read. But from what I read, there was some planning that this guy put into this to shoot it, right? Croker. He planned. He obviously knew where he wanted to go, knew where he needed to be to have that line of sight, all that type of stuff. But again, when you're a lone wolf, you're not telling anybody that, right? If you're operating, you work drug cases, you work bank robbery, somebody always tells somebody something, and somebody in that friends group decides, yeah, this is not a good idea. I better report this to somebody. But when you're a lone wolf, there's nobody to report it, right? It's everything is in his mind. And that's what the FBI is going to be looking for. Was there anybody else that knew or should have known what was going on? Unfortunately, it's hard. And again, we see this a lot with active shooters. And it's very similar scenario with active shooters, right? They make up their mind that they're going to do something. And again, they're acting alone and nobody else knows about it. And they're able to carry out the attack because there's just nobody to have law enforcement intervene to call somebody.
Well, from one of the high school students that went to high school with him, I saw that interview, and he said, listen, he was a bullied kid. He was picked on. He's the kid that sat in the lunchroom all by himself. So he was really, I think, very much of a loner if we're to believe this young man. And believe me, this young man, in my opinion, wasn't lying. He was just saying his reflections about what he noticed as a high school classmate. I also wanted to comment, I'm going to have to read these off a little bit, but if you look at Reagan, John Hinckley, another lone wolf. This wasn't some big conspiracy to take off Reagan for this was a love. He did it for the love of Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster, right.
Yep. If you look at Charles Guiteau, who took the shot at Garfield, and sorry if I butchered that French name, Guiteau, he did it because he felt like he had worked on his campaign or was involved in getting him elected in some small way, and that he wasn't appreciated. And it just built in his mind, and he decided, basically, I'm going to kill you then. Just right. A retribution on his own again. No one involved in that one. McKinley, same thing, total lone wolf. Kennedy, although a lot of people argue on this, and I'll anger a lot of people who love conspiracies. You and I know me in my class, and I bet you did in yours because you were just a class ahead of me. We went all through that case. We held the gun. I held the rifle. We've got to go through every ounce of evidence in that case, and there was none supporting, literally tens of thousands of documents, nothing supporting that it was anything other than he had an attention situation. He wanted attention. I mean, if you go back and psychoanalyze him, he was a nut job looking for attention. And that's why this falls in line for me. Other than Lincoln, that was a true conspiracy. They thought they could somehow get, reinstate the Confederacy. That was a true conspiracy. But the last four I named, that was just about emotional retribution / anger / look at me.
Right. And you, Sirhan, right? Robert Kennedy, when he was running for president in 68. Yeah. Same type of deal. I mean, all these people, and like I said, they're the most difficult because you don't have any information on these guys. You're not looking at a group or an organization that they are affiliated with. And so, they're just the ordinary citizen that you stand next to in the grocery store or Walmart every day, or you pass on the street. Nobody thinks anything of him. Like you said, the people who knew him, his classmates, said, well, yeah, he was a loner, but there are a lot of loners out there, right? There are a lot of people that are a little different. And so nothing indicated that one day this guy was going to do something like this. And so that's what makes it so difficult to figure this out and to stop it. And like I said, that's what makes them the hardest ones, because it could be anybody, right? And it just you don't know. And so and we'll see as the investigation unfolds and what the FBI uncovers on him. But yeah, based on what they've gotten so far, I don't.
Oh, DJ, you froze up. Oh, shoot. DJ, if you can hear me, you froze. I want to get to some questions. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience that we can put up there? Oh, shoot, DJ, I hope we get you back. I'm going to look up some of the questions from Twitter while hopefully DJ gets his, there he is. There he's back. DJ, I was saying you froze for a minute there, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm glad you're back, because we're just going to go into a few questions either from the audience or from Twitter. So
okay,
let's get into a few of these because they're always really good. Let me see. Okay, everybody's talking about JFK and the Warren Report because I mentioned JFK. That'll always get everybody who's a conspiracy theorist out and about. But let me ask some questions specifically about this. Oh, here we go. Were local police capable of communicating directly with Secret Service? I'll let you take that one, DJ.
Yeah, so like I said, typically in this type of situation, you're going to have a command post set up where you're going to have the Secret Service, their agent in charge, their intel people. You're going to have the local police, sheriff's department, and whomever else is there on site. And so they're going to be co-located. And so the communication would go through the local police. Everything is going to go into that command post. All the Secret Service communication is going in there. And then they're either hearing that real time on the radios, or they've got somebody there to say, hey, we've got a local police officer that's saying this, or hey, can you have the police, Secret Service telling or asking the local police, can you go check this out? So they're going to be co-located and in communication with each other. Whether or not, they had each other's radios, that I don't know. And Jennifer, you may know, but I kind of doubt it. But they would have had a command post where all the communication would have come into that central location.
Yeah, and as far as comms always are an issue. The FBI has very specialized radios that no one can intersect with. So we would always have to give our radios actually over to a local person or people so that we could be in communication if that's what we decided to use, which we always decided to use our radios typically. But in any event, there should have been communication, and if there wasn't, that's just another example of a breakdown. See, yeah. I've heard they use DNA to identify him in 1 hour. That didn't make much sense to me. Since when can you get a DNA match in 1 hour? They probably use something else. What do you think on that, DJ?
Not a DNA expert, but like I said, it would have been all hands on deck. So I don't know how they would have used DNA to identify him in 1 hour, like fingerprints. Obviously, they would have taken his fingerprints right there off the body. They would have run those because I understand there was no ID on it, right? So they would have run the fingerprints. And if he's in the system, obviously you got to be in the system for your fingerprints to come back. Then that would have been a way to identify. That would have been the first thing that I would have thought of. They would probably, just quickly run his fingerprints because, again, you had all the resources basically of all law enforcement at that point. So as soon as they could have printed him and put it in a machine, and they could have run it right then and immediately got a hit if his fingerprints were in the system. Again, I don't know that they were in the system, and he's only 20 years old. But sometimes some states now take a print when they do driver's license and things like that. So who knows? And then DNA, again, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know, again, why his DNA, because again, it has to be in some system somewhere, like Jennifer, now we take DNA and we arrest somebody, right? So all arrestees, got their DNA in the system. But besides that, unless you're not in any government system, you may be in 23andMe or some system like that, but that takes time because you're not going to get that in an hour. But
yeah, the genetic genealogy. But like you said,
yeah,
all hands were on deck. And now when you travel, oftentimes you have to leave your fingerprint, as you know. There's,
you mean like internationally or?
well, I just mean internationally, you have to use your fingerprint often.
Right,
I mean, it
right,
depends what system you go through. I've been through
right.
systems where, you're getting your facial recognition. They're doing facial recognition now. But to your point, Bushy, that asked that, did they use that? I can tell you when all hands are on deck, it's amazing what they can do. I can't imagine they could make a DNA 23andMe genetic genealogy match that quick, even with everyone working on it. But I don't know for sure how they made the ID that quickly. It wasn't within 1 hour, though, I didn't think.
Yeah, because again, and I know because I didn't know who the shooter was. Did they know that night? Was it the next morning that they were reporting the name of the shooter? I'm not sure exactly when that started coming out in the media. So, again, there would have been a lag time between when law enforcement knew and they actually gave it to the media. But yeah, I don't know if it was that soon because I was still watching the coverage an hour after it happened, and I don't ever. They still hadn't identified who the shooter was at that point.
Well, and I don't doubt that it could have been done in reverse. In other words, we know the gun was registered to the father. In my opinion, it was the gun, not DNA and not fingerprints, that led to the identification.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, I can think about it. If you were in the state where you had to register that firearm, that AR-15, then they would have traced it back to the father, and they would have went looking for him. Obviously, he wasn't the father, and they would have run. He has a son, the 20-year-old, and they would have pulled him, and the picture would have come up, and they would have said, "Oh, now we know who it is." Yeah. Right? Yeah.
I think DNA, no. Fingerprints, no. Gun, likely,
Yeah.
since we know it was registered to daddy. Okay, Jen, do they ever pull from other government agencies for additional coverage, like HSI, DEA, et cetera, to help the Secret Service? DJ, do you want to answer?
Well, not that I know of. Now, yeah, I don't think, and especially with again, I don't know. I'm not a Secret Service agent. Didn't, never played one, but I wouldn't think so, especially with a presidential candidate, especially, the presumptive, he will be the nominee here in a day or two, nominee for the Republican Party or president, right? You're not going to use, they usually don't pull. They may, well, I would say that they will use other agencies on the outer perimeter, right? You're not getting close to the protectee, but you may assist. They may have you standing on the manhole cover 10 miles away on the route back to the airport, right? Something like that. But yeah, they usually don't in the inner perimeter. Yeah, it's going to be because it's just continuity, right? If you're Secret Service, the procedures, how to react, you've trained and done all that. And so they want to have their people on that inner perimeter to handle all of that. And, again, I'm speaking out of school a little bit because I've never been to Secret Service training or done that. But again, that's what I would want, and I would think that's how they would handle it.
And also, we know from our experience when Secret Service has come in with a president or a vice president. When I was in the Virgin Islands, I was the SRA or SSRA there. And so when presidents would come to the Virgin Islands, which they like to do for obvious reasons, we were notified. I was notified, hey, listen, we're coming in. And like DJ said earlier, you do as much advance as you can and you make the recommendations, but they're going to send their own advance team. And you're going to be far out on that perimeter because the actual agents that are assigned, that's who his go-to people are. Like when I was with Comey, he knew me, his wife knew me. They're going to know you. You're right there. You're on the front lines, right beside them on these details. And then further out are other agents, and then further out are locals, and then further out, or anybody else you need. So I hope that answered the question. That I think, yes, resources could be utilized from other agencies. I can't imagine DEA. I've never known DEA.
No, they use it right. Yeah,
but
yeah.
DEA has their own responsibilities with narcotic trafficking, so they're not really trained
No.
or involved with protection. Because I want to say this too, detail protection is totally different from being an agent. You have
Right. There's special training, right? That's another thing. I mean, yeah, there's training that goes along. That's why I said that you wouldn't be in that. You'd be in the outer perimeter. You wouldn't be anywhere close where you may have to come in contact with the protectee or anything like that. Because yeah, you're trained. The reaction, like I said, and again, they want somebody who's had that training to be, around the protectee and close in. So yes, they would maybe use other agencies to assist if they had to, but again, they like at the Republican convention now going on in Milwaukee, right? They probably have other agencies helping with stuff again, but they're going to be a long way away from the actual convention hall and where all that stuff, where the main focus would be.
All right, let's pick up another one. So who will be held accountable for this, or will anyone be held accountable? That's what worries me. Go ahead, DJ. I'll piggyback off of you. I have an answer. I'm sure you do too.
Will anybody? Yeah, somebody's gonna be held accountable, right? There's always somebody who's held accountable. It's gonna be interesting. Who knows how this is gonna come out, because we got as an investigator, I always say wait till the investigation is done. Like, we know all the facts, right? We can sit here, guess, and speculate, which is what we're doing on a lot of this. But at the end of the day, before hopefully anybody makes any decisions, they're gonna have all the facts and know what they're looking for and looking at. But buck's always stops with the top. So you got the director of the Secret Service. I mean, obviously she's going to take a big blow on this because she's in charge, right? She's the director. She's been paid to be in charge. And like we said, there are going to be some things, I can imagine there won't be some things identified as lapses that, from my perspective, right, they should have had these things covered, right? These weren't things this wasn't some super attack that was saying, man, we never saw this coming. Like, how would we have known? This is somebody got the high ground, had a direct view into the podium, that kind of thing. And I've already seen where the Secretary of Homeland Security has commented on that, right? There should not have been a line of sight open like that. So that tells you, and he's her boss. So that tells you what they're thinking.
Right. This isn't the Green Goblin coming in on some fancy spacecraft or some drone that, shot that nobody's ever experienced. This is back to just gumshoe. How do you conduct a security detail, really? So the question was, will somebody answer for this? And I say yes. And what exactly will happen, we don't know. They'll do a thorough, what they call after action review of all of this, and they will go through everything that they did right, because they did do a lot of things right, and everything that they did wrong. And they're going to change some things, I believe.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Jennifer. And what people have to understand is, so you got two investigations going on. You got the FBI investigation. They're actually investigating the assassination attempt, right? So they're investigating the shooter and who he knew and who he was in communication with, and where he got the gun, where he got the ammunition, all that kind of stuff, right? Their investigation really won't have anything to do. Then the Secret Service will conduct, like Jennifer just talked about, their own internal investigation of how did we allow this guy to get in here and this to happen. Now, the FBI may say, well, here's how he did it. They won't say, here's where your lapses were. That's not their job, right? That's not the FBI's job. Is to say, they're to look at, the attempt and why the guy attempted it and try to figure that out. So there's two kind of separate things going on with this, and it'll be a Secret Service internal investigation to figure out where the lapses were in security.
And a lot of people may not also understand that Secret Service has a very narrow scope of authority. They handle the protection of the president and Congress people, and they also do assist with counterfeit, and they also assist with credit card fraud.
Right. Yeah, bank fraud.
Yep. With letters of coordination, basically, with the Bureau, right? So the bureaus, this is going to be the Bureau, the FBI's baby to investigate. Now, obviously, the individual that is believed to be the lone actor is deceased. So it won't be as broad of investigation as it could have been from the standpoint of actually litigating the case. Believe me, will drive this down to, the nth degree to make sure they have everybody and anybody that was involved in this thing, which it doesn't seem like there is anybody, but they'll still have all his contacts that he made, exactly what he did, probably for months prior to this, nailed down. But Secret Service isn't going to be involved in any of that, is what I was trying to get at. They're not going to be involved in the investigation portion, other than what happened right at that moment.
Right. Yeah, and that's not their job. Like, yeah, these deals are defined. Like, the FBI has jurisdiction over assassination attempts. That's their jurisdiction. Yep, like you said, Secret Service, and what a lot of people don't know, Secret Service was actually formed after the Civil War to investigate counterfeiting. Right? They were part of the Department of Treasury to investigate, because there was so much counterfeiting. Back then, each state had their own currency, right? So there was so much counterfeiting going on after the Civil War. They formed the Secret Service, and they were like one of the first federal agencies. They were formed before the FBI. And in fact, the Department of Justice used Secret Service agents to conduct investigations up until 1908, when they formed the FBI, right? That's why they wanted to have their own agents, because they had to borrow agents from the Department of Treasury to actually conduct investigations. And they took over the protection stuff. I think it was after the McKinley assassination, or 1880s, I guess, or 1890s. It's when they started getting into the protection role that has basically taken over what they do now. Now, they still have jurisdiction over counterfeiting. And they do, like Jennifer said, work credit card fraud and bank fraud, but their primary focus is protection. President, vice president, candidates, some foreign dignitaries, right? When they visit, and that's basically it. I mean, they don't do a lot of, the marshals protect the Supreme Court justices and a lot of the other people in DC. So even Secret Service, they're a very small organization. I think they only have less than 3,500 agents. Yeah, which is probably a fourth of what the FBI has. So they're a small organization.
See why I have DJ on? We also got a free history lesson.
That is free. That's right.
Which I love. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Oh, good. So this is how good my mods are. They're actually putting up some of the history that you just recited. But
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, McKinley at 1901.
Written form. I love that. Okay, I'm going to get to just a few more questions off of Twitter. Okay. This is Critical Mass. Now, Critical Mass, that's this Twitter handle. I don't know who this person is, but they are really smart. I think they're an attorney or something, but they're always making great comments. This is their question. Why would the head of Secret Service, Cheadle, as indicated in the post circulated, be the one to give the order if she's not on site? Would that authority not be delegated? Per SMS reports that Secret Service sniper failed to follow prior protocol. Exactly what protocol did he fail to follow, and how? That was complicated, but basically the report is that Cheadle herself, right? That's just, like Ray saying.
The director of the Secret Service, yeah.
The director had to give this order to shoot. Now, I could tell you that would not happen in the Bureau. No way. That would be the SWAT team commander or the director detail commander that would give such a thing. But we're a huge organization in comparison. That doesn't really sound right to me, but maybe they did go up the chain that far. What do you think?
Yeah, same with you. It doesn't sound right to me, and I would doubt it very seriously, right? Why would you, like, it's just the person answered their own question. Like, why would you have somebody that's that far removed from the scene giving an order, right? Yeah, she's not handling, because obviously this has brought a focus on all of these, but these campaign events are going on all the time, right? So you got former President Trump speaking all the time or holding rallies. You got President Biden speaking all the time or holding rallies. So this stuff, so she can't be sitting in a room waiting in case we need somebody to give the order, right? Like you said, that's going to be delegated to those agents in charge of those detail would have, if anybody had that authority, it's going to be somebody there on the ground, and it would be the agent in charge of that detail that would make the decision. Not even the special agent in charge of that Secret Service office in that town. It would be the detail. It would be delegated to them. Just like you said, if we were on a SWAT operation, and I'm the SWAT team commander, then that's going to be my call, right? Whether to have the snipers engaged. Right now, we may have an ASAC there or somebody, a commander there that I have to run into. But once we go, green and we're tactical, then the tactical leader is making that call, and they're going to have to answer for that call too. So, but I just don't see in any why that would happen. I mean, command is decentralized out, to those levels, because you can't make a quick decision when you got somebody back in Washington or wherever they are. They're just not going to have the information they need. Like I said, it was difficult enough. That's why you had the lag time there, because you probably had to have that information go through a command post first to that, agent in charge to make that call. That creates a lag time, and that's right there. Yeah.
And if they did, maybe that answers a lot of the questions as to why there was a 3-minute lapse. I mean,
Well, I can imagine if she had to make the call, it would have been like a 10-minute lapse. You'd be like, what's going on? Because people, again, once you make that decision, it's made, and that bullet leaves that sniper's rifle. It's over. So everybody wants to be sure, right? And so you need somebody who's there in the middle of it, who has all the situational awareness to be able to make that call and be able to do it quickly.
This was an interesting question from Elise, and she says, when will we officially learn whether the injury was from a bullet or glass? I would submit we already know it was from a bullet. It hit his ear and pierced, actually, the top portion of the ear. I don't think there's any other information other than that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that the possibility that it could have been like, I know they have those, what you call them, those glass things up, the podiums, by the podiums all the time when they have the speakers speak. And so are people saying that maybe the bullet hit that and then that shattered and probably broke off? I haven't heard that theory. The reaction was, you see things, you can almost see a puff, right, going behind Trump's head as the ground. So you think there was something else there, because we've been on range. You can't see around, right? It's moving too fast, right? The velocity, I don't know how many feet per second, all that kind of stuff, but it's moving too fast. But on the camera, it catches it. So maybe something slowed it down. I don't know. But again, that'll be all part of the after action that the Secret Service does on the shooting and what happened where. And I'm sure they'll have to make all that public. It'll be in good time.
Well, I think one thing you might not be aware of, because I know you're not always on Twitter or always on TikTok or all these other platforms where conspiracy theories run a complete muck, but there's one that's running a complete muck. I only know because I was contacted to do a mainstream media interview regarding, could this whole thing be a hoax and not have occurred? And my answer to that is, please just ask the fireman's family whether they think it's a hoax.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah.
Glass that somebody cut his ear or anything else. So that's where the genesis.
Yeah. Like you said, and again, that's why I don't get caught up in a lot of these theories, because they can keep, right. You can keep going down those rabbit trails, but this would be I want to say the greatest hoax. It'd be the worst hoax, because obviously it was reported. You had every major news outlet that was covering the actual rally. They were there, right? They saw it with their own eyes, and cameras were able to film and get it in real time. So, this is not some story that we heard after the fact. Like I said, when they cut in, they were showing the video of it immediately.
Right. And also, I guess to that point, some people are saying that literally Biden, the Bureau, everybody was involved in this in some way. Um, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that except for it didn't happen. I mean, I think it'd be ridiculous to have one thing. You and I both worked for the government for a long time, right? Like I said, I was in the military, I worked for the government for a long time. We know nobody can keep a secret. That's why whenever people start talking about these conspiracies, going back to the Kennedy assassination, right? And like you said, and when quick side story, when I first got to the Dallas office, the actual case file for the investigation of the Kennedy assassination was in closed files. I mean, any agent, you just walk in and read the case file. Like I would peruse the actual case file from 1963, right, of the Kennedy assassination, and this was 30 years later. So you can't. I mean, nobody can keep a secret in government or anywhere else. So you can't have these type of conspiracies because people can't keep their mouths closed. Somebody will come out and say something eventually. And and there'd be so many other ways to to do something if you want to do something to somebody instead of having this lone guy, 20-year-old, right? It's just that would be the worst planned conspiracy ever when you had as much power as some of these people that she mentioned have, right? They got resources and power to do anything they want. Why would they do it this way? It would be from an investigator standpoint, right? So like, why would they do it that way when there's so many ways?
20-year-old kid that's an aide at a nursing home.
Nursing home, right?
Brilliant. We're going to get this. I think it was a nursing home aide was what Crooks did for a living. We're going to find him. We're going to put him up to this. It's just fails logic.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it doesn't make any type of sense on any level.
So another question from Andy Selany. He says, what is the protocol for local police officers when he sees something suspicious at a rally? So you have a local on the perimeter. What are they supposed to do?
Well, I don't know exactly, but one of the first things you're going to do is, one, you're going to confront it. And as you're doing that, almost simultaneously, you're going to let, like I said, the command post. I keep going back to this, command post, and people may be wondering what this is. But again, there was a command post, I'm sure, set up somewhere there with all the people in charge, local law enforcement, Secret Service, everybody's there. And you want to let them know, because you got to get the word out. Hey, suspicious person in this area, I'm approaching that person now. And you can approach, and then you're going to get that information and figure out who they are, identify them, and you're going to get that information to the command post. And then they're going to run his ID. You're going to take his driver's license or whatever. You're going to run their ID to figure out who they are. So it's going to be that type of thing. But you're going to communicate that almost immediately as you intervene or try to find out what's going on with that person.
Yeah, it does make me wonder. Hopefully they did. Obviously they had a command post. There is no doubt about that. What I am curious about, whether there was a communication, a comms breakdown. In other words, we saw on television all these people screaming that the man was up on the roof, right? And then that officers went up on there. You just have to wonder, was there a breakdown of communication just because physically speaking, one was lifting the other, as you mentioned, the other one's hanging on to the rungs and trying to, look over. And you wonder if there was any communication about that at all. So
and that's my thing. Again, as I piece together these media reports, that's what I kind of came up with is, and like you said, we both keep going by communication because we know how important that is in any type of scenario, especially tactical scenario where things are happening so fast. And like you said, that shows what would have slowed it down, right? You got these guys, these police officers are trying to do their job, but they can't talk on the radio at the same time, right? One guy's got his hands holding another guy up, other guy's trying to pull himself up on the roof. All of a sudden he's ducking, he's falling, right? Between the time he falls, gathers himself, grabs his radio, right? The time is ticking, right? And so that could very well explain it. I don't know if that's what happened, but that to me would explain why there was a gap or these gaps in communication. And again, I keep saying command post. I'm assuming that because I don't know, but I can't imagine it, just like you can't imagine that there was not, because that's right. That's this standard operating procedure for any type of operation like this. You have a centralized command post right there on the scene where you get all the players.
Absolutely. I want to make sure we didn't miss anything because I thought we were pretty comprehensive. Again, for me, this was such an important discussion about behind the scenes. What are these agents? What were these Secret Service guys doing? What do you do to prepare? What went wrong? From boots on the ground, we were knuckle draggers, right? The people just out there humping and doing it. So hopefully that gave you all some insight. Let's see. B says, was it abnormal to not have had Secret Service or law enforcement already on that roof? Yes, I think we both agree on that, right, DJ? There should have been somebody up on that roof or protecting from anybody getting on the roof.
Exactly. Yeah. In my mind, there should have been. Yeah. And maybe the biggest explanation of all I want to hear is why there wasn't anyone. And maybe we've already heard that, when the Secret Service says, well, that was the local law enforcement's responsibility. Mm-hmm. And maybe local law enforcement says, hey, we didn't think we had a need for it. But yeah, in my mind, that's the biggest question I have is why wasn't that building shut down? And like you said, they had somebody, a law enforcement officer physically there to prevent anyone from getting in or up on that roof.
And it's not like they were in New York City where they had to shut down all the.
Exactly. Yeah. That was, from what I could see from the overhead, I don't know if there were any other buildings that offered that type of, a line of fire and direct line of sight into the podium. I just don't think there were. Maybe there were some that were a little further out. But again, the further out you get, the harder it is to make a shot, all that kind of stuff. But that building was close enough where, like you said, you're doing a site survey, you're going to say, hey, yeah, we got to lock this down and make sure this is covered especially during the time of the rally and even before. We're going to lock it down and make sure nobody sneaks in there before we lock it down. And then we're going to have somebody walk through it before the rally starts to make sure nobody did get in there after we lock it down.
And you had a 20-year-old figure it out. 20-year-old kid, nursing aide, figure out, hey, I want to take a shot at Trump. This is the best spot.
Yeah, and that's where it goes back to he had to do some recon and planning because he had to be there to see where that stage and that podium was going to be set up, right? I mean, or maybe he's been to that campground before and they have events there all the time. This is the same place. I don't know. But he had to know that, hey, this area, this is how it's arranged. And this is the best place for me to be to take my shot, and that I'm going to be able to get in there, right? At least I could think I can get in there. So there was some planning, but again, if we're talking, we think a lone wolf now, he was the only one, right? He could have driven by there. He could have gone there while they were doing the stage setup before, right? This would have probably been before Secret Service shut it down. Even if they shut it, I don't know how many hours before, 48 hours or whatever they do, that nobody gets in and out. But there still had to be construction people. There are people setting up the stage and getting the seats in place and vendors coming in and out. You got all that stuff going on the days before. So he could get caught up in that and just, see the actual, okay, here's what they're doing, here's where this is going to be. And I would be surprised if the Bureau doesn't find drawings or something where he had seen that and knew how to set up, right? Because he wouldn't have, how could he just look up first time, oh, I'm just going to climb up to the top of this building and see if I can see anything, right? I don't think that happened. I think he had planned this out, yeah.
And I know they've had trouble getting into the phone, and I always try to tell the audience that, listen, when it comes to passwords and getting in a phone, this is not CSI where we get the phone and then we just all of a sudden.
Right. You plug it into a computer and then everything pops up, yeah.
Oh, password. No, passwords are difficult and they're going to work. I think they'll figure it out. Actually, Secret Service has one of the best programs for digging in deep to the cellular devices. And Apple,
I don't know what type of phone it was, if it was an Apple or an Android. I know Apple's a little more difficult, and we've had to get cooperation from Apple on devices before. I think it was a shooter in California, mass shooter several years ago that they finally basically had to get Apple to do it because they just couldn't get anybody to get in. Apple phones are sometimes very difficult. Android's a little more, a little easier just because there's just so many of them out there. So many different things. But yeah, they'll eventually get in there. And you said that, I meant to mention that you said it earlier about the phone. That is going to be the treasure trove, right, of information that comes out of this, right? When that phone, they finally get access to what's on that phone.
Yeah, I agree. Let me take one more question from M. Finn. How can a situation like this be prevented in the future? Go ahead, DJ.
Well, better planning, like we've been talking about the whole time. It's a matter of planning and preparation when you're setting up your security. I think that's the biggest thing. And then training, I guess you go back to your training, but the planning and making sure you've got every possible avenue covered. And I think that's what Jennifer and I both, from a tactical perspective, looked at. I know I did when I first looked at this, and right after it happened, I was just thinking, because in my mind, I'm always thinking, how would I have done this? How would I have planned the security for this type of event? And what would I have done? And shutting things down and having things covered. So, you'll probably hear them talking about expanding their perimeter and things like that. But it's just, you just got to be flexible in those situations. Even, I don't care what your perimeter is, whether it's a few hundred feet or a mile, if something's outside of that, but it's close enough that you think this doesn't feel right, then you include it in there. You just bring it in, and that's just understanding the threat. And like Jennifer and I have said, we've gone talk about some of these old things, but these aren't anything new. I mean, people get the high ground, right? Jennifer, you've worked in football stadiums for big games and things. I've done it, and then the rafters, right? You got somebody up there. There's somebody you're gonna have these. You want to take the high ground. You want to control that because one, you see it, and two, you don't want anybody else to have control of it. And it's the same philosophy in this. You want to control that high ground and make sure that nobody else can get there. And so I just think better planning is the biggest thing.
Yep. Well, we will stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be a lot more nuggets that come out, especially once they get into that cell phone. It's something that I honestly didn't think we'd see in my lifetime. Again, I wasn't born for Kennedy, but definitely remember Reagan. I think I was in like 7th grade or 6th grade, and I remember when that happened. I certainly didn't think it would happen ever again, quite honestly, in my lifetime, because I thought we would learn from these mistakes and hopefully it never happens again. The other thing is that bothers me is just the vitriol hate in this country right now on both sides. I hope that ends too. It really is terrible. That's just the sidebar. It has nothing to do with investigation, but it's so hard to see so much hate. It just doesn't compute for me.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Like you said, the times that we live in now, and it's gotten so extreme, right? The hate and you're probably a little more optimistic than I am about this never happening again, because I obviously I don't want it to happen. I hope it never happens again, but realistically, like I said, it's just the occurrences of violence in our society, like all these active shooter events that we've had. Nobody's out of, as we see with this, anybody can be reached or touched, right? It just, it happens to little kids in elementary school. It happened to a candidate for president of the United States. I mean, unfortunately, we have cowards with guns that are willing to do these type of things. And so I don't think, unfortunately, I would love to be wrong, but I just don't think it's going to, stop, because there's so many people out there that, just like this lone wolf guy, that think, hey, this is the way I can affect something.
And I think one thing is people can really help situations like this from happening, especially in big crowds and things, is just really being vigilant. And, not that the crowd should have gotten involved and, tried to take him down or anything, but if you see a guy dressed like that, meaning kind of in it wasn't full on camo, it was more tan, but kind of a military type, quasi-military type, with a AR slung across his shoulder in a fairground. You know, it's out of place, right? And those people did what they needed to do, scream and
Yeah,
help,
yeah, they
get help.
did. Yeah,
But
right.
it is about that. It's about vigilance. And you were talking about active shooters. And that's what it really takes, is vigilance by everybody around when you're at a Dallas Cowboy game, or you're, you know, at some big concert event, is just being vigilant with people who are around. Because I do agree with you about this. The mass shootings are never ending. I mean, they've almost become a weekly deal.
Right. Yeah. And maybe I'm wrong, but I see this as almost an extension of that, right? We look at it as an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate, which it was a shooting event. I mean, the number of people that, it would classify, the Bureau had to classify because of the number of people that were shot and everything, it would be classified as a mass shooting event. It's the same, thing as this: a lone wolf, mass shooter takes a gun and decides and so that's why I say I'm not very optimistic that these are going to stop. It's just the victim here. We all knew who, the intended victim. I guess they were the victim, the actual person, the firefighter that was killed, and family members. But the intended person, we knew who he was because he's been a former president of the United States. But when it happens to kids in a school, at a shopping center, wherever, and how do you stop or solve that? I mean, I wish I knew, right? I'd be the first one to tell everybody that this is what we need to do. But there's not a simple answer. That's the problem.
It's true, DJ. I want to say thank you so much for your time tonight. I promised to only keep you for an hour, and I think we've gone well over an hour. So.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, Jennifer. You did say
over an hour. I can't believe it. It just flew by. But I want to thank you for the well over an hour. I also want to say, I hope you come back and join us. I really want to talk political corruption with you, because that was your bailiwick with the Bureau. And boy, do I have a case to talk to you about.
All right. Hey, I love to anytime. No problem. I love talking to this stuff. So it's great seeing you and talking to you. So thanks a lot for inviting me.
All right. Thank you, DJ. And until next time, may justice be served. Bye, everyone.
There you go. Bye-bye.
Bye.